Hey, everybody. KC here, and I'm with a familiar face.
Morning, Kevin.
Good morning. So today, we're going to do a little something different because today is the app's actual 20th anniversary of Morning Newsbeat. It was 20 years ago today. I feel like I have a Beatles song coming on.
Yeah, Sergeant Pepper's taught a band to play.
20 years ago today, I wrote my first Morning Newsbeat. And so Michael and I thought we might have just a little conversation about it. Now, underneath this, you're going to see a brief video, which sort of chronicles some of the places that I've gone and a lot of the people that I've seen over the years and had a chance to spend time with. And it's been a fun journey. But anyway, so Michael and I are going to pretty much talk about it. Michael, you've been around for what? 13 of the 20 years?
Actually, 14 at this point. I joined Morning Newsbeat in 2007.
Wow.
Seems like yesterday.
It does. So, okay. So 20 years ago today, roughly, November of 2001, where were you? What were you doing at the time?
November 2001, I was still working for FMI. Now, obviously, there are going to be some Morning Newsbeat readers who remember when I used to be at FMI. I was the senior vice president there. And 20 years ago, I was working about a block away from the White House, working for FMI. And this being November, probably doing a lot of planning for the upcoming Midwinter Executive Conference, which FMI always hold and still does hold in January every year. What were you doing 20 years ago, other than starting Morning Newsbeat?
Starting Morning Newsbeat. That has come to define my life. Several weeks before I started Morning Newsbeat, though, I ran my first marathon, the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, D.C. And it's people know it was some weeks after 9/11. And the thing I remember most vividly about it was how it both starts and ends near the Pentagon. And we ran past the Pentagon, which was still smoldering at that point. And you had, 20,000 runners, all of whom, as we went by the Pentagon, were chanting USA, USA, USA. It was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. That was this, as has been written about and talked about in a lot of other forums, there was this amazing sort of coming together. And it was my first marathon, my first very slow marathon. I've run two. I did. The second one, I was equally, just about the same amount of time, 5.5 hours, just about, a little bit less than 5.5 hours. But I survived them. So that's what I was doing 20 years. I was launching Morning Newsbeat.
Well, the other thing we could talk about in 20 years, other than the fact that our hair was a lot darker than both of us and a lot more plentiful, is how many body parts have been operated on in the 20 years. I mean, my shoulder, it's basically, we're falling apart here, Kevin.
You've actually fared less well in that, if that's the right language, less well than I have in that case. I've had 2 meniscus tears. I've had no body parts replaced. I'm this way you're looking at here, baby, is the original equipment.
Original equipment. And just so
these are all factory parts.
I've had shoulder work done, so here's what I want on, and my teeth had to be completely repaired, but that was taking place. That goes back 20 years, 30 years. That's like been my whole life. Just my joy.
Yeah. Listen, it certainly has been an interesting time when you think about what has happened just in the 20 years. I mean, it's extraordinary to me. I was listening to a podcast the other day about Apple and the iPhone. And, the iPhone came out in 2007. I mean, Morning Newsbeat is 6 years older than the iPhone. And I can't even remember a time I didn't have an iPhone. When you think about how technology has changed so much in those 20 years, I don't even think my house was wireless 20 years ago. I had to find a place to plug in. I think when I did Newsbeat in the early days, in hotels, sometimes it was dial-up. I mean, so much has changed in terms of speed and facility. websites becoming so much more dynamic and easy to put together and things like that. But even then, I have to say, I remember that one of the things I remember most about Morning Newsbeat is how fast it came together. I was working before that. I was working at another website, which ended ignominiously, and which is the point at which I sort of decided I'm done. I have to take control over my own career. I do have a kind of a desire for autonomy, which that served. My wife would say that I just don't play well with others either way. And, I can remember from the moment I decided to do it to the moment we launched, I don't think it was a month. I think it happened all very, very quickly. Just found somebody to design it and figured I'll just do it and make it up as I go along. Not make up the news, but sort of make up the format. Because I was just convinced that people wanted something that was, seemed to be well written, seemed to be a little provocative and irreverent, and just something that would be different than, vanilla trade journalism, which I think is most of what we got and continue to get out there. And that was just
Kevin,
I just wanted to have fun.
Let's talk about the industry. All right, let's talk about the industry, because 20 years is a long time and an awful lot has happened. In 2001, when you started Morning Newsbeat, we were still in the shadow of the dot-com collapse that happened in 2000. And at that point, there may be a lot of Morning Newsbeat readers who do not remember the name Webvan, which was this incredibly well-supported with finances idea about delivering groceries to people. And it collapsed in the blink of an eye. In
I 2000, can remember, and I think I'm pretty sure I did a story about it. After 20 years, I don't really remember all the stories I did, but I can remember going to watch the Giants play in San Francisco in their new stadium. I forget what it was called at the time. It's not AT&T Park. It was some other iteration, some other name, and it was right after. It was pretty early, and I can remember sitting in the stands, and every beverage holder at every seat had the Webvan name on it. Webvan had been out of business at that point for a couple of months. And, I remember looking at that and saying, well, I wonder what that cost them that might have kept them in business longer. I mean, I think the Webvan example is a great one because it is a great example of how they put their money probably against all the wrong stuff. And invested so much money and lost so much money over, a fairly short period of time that it was this classic, flame out. I can remember, and this even goes back previous to Morning Newsbeat. I can remember as being a young reporter going to Boulder, Colorado to write a story. It was one of those product stories that trade magazines still do. I hated doing them, but I would do them. You could arrange myself to get categories I wanted to write about. Beer was one of those categories. So I went to Boulder to do a piece about the Boulder Brewing Company. And their whole thing was they were the dirty beer because they had a little sediment in the bottom. And that was a symbol of their, how natural or pure they were. And I can remember the guy I was talking to at the Boulder Brewing Company, how much money they were spending on putting the brewery together, and said, our goal, we think we can be national, but we're going to build it this way. We're not like that guy in Boston who all he wanted to do was he lets other people brew his beer and he spends all his money on marketing. Well, that beer in Boston was Sam Adams, right? And it was Jim Koch. And I mean, I don't think it is inaccurate to say that certainly in terms of impact and growth, Sam Adams is a much bigger beer company than the Boulder Brewing Company. And I think, but that was another great example of companies having to decide, okay, where are we going to put our money? Marketing is really important. Selling stuff is really important. Cook was able to do that and have other people brew his beer until he made enough money where he could start brewing it himself. I think the quality is just fine, but that to me is a sort of a business lesson that endures.
If I can, let me stay on beer for a second, because back in 2001, again, we're doing everything in 20-year increments today. In 2001, when you and I both traveled around the United States, and if you wanted a local beer, I can remember times going into a bar, saying, I'll take some local beer. And the local beer would be Budweiser, because there was a Budweiser brewery within 30, 40 miles of it. And here we are now in 2021, and a local beer is something that got made down the block by some guy in his basement. We have gotten into the age of microbrews, and the whole world.
Well, in fact, that's sort of been cyclical. There was a time, and I couldn't put a year on it, but early, I can remember there was a whole period of time when there were tons of local brews and tons of local brew pubs and things like that, and they died. A lot of them died because they were, and I used to love going there because you could get a decent beer and the meal was pretty good. It didn't cost a lot of money, and you can have an interesting conversation with a bartender. I thrive on conversations with bartenders, and then they sort of, a lot of them dried up, and now there's been kind of a resurgence. And so I think that, all these things are sort of cyclical.
Everything is, and I was going to go there with you because, again, you and I traveled for our jobs, and I can remember going to different parts of the country. I'd never heard of, I think it was Hamm's, the beer of Sky Blue Waters. And I had never heard the jingle or heard of the beer. And it wasn't an especially great beer, but it was a regional beer. And I used to love getting regional beers.
You just alienated the 47 Hamm's employees who were all subscribers to Morning Newsbeat. I can't believe it. I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry to the Ham subscribers. But now when you get a microbrew, because you're right, it's cyclical. And the marketing went from very local to national, now back to local. But the other thing that's happened is the quality of those beers. I mean, now I've been drinking beer for a long time in my life. And I when I'm offered a choice, it's like, oh my God, I need to, go on Google and figure out which do I want, a hoppy beer tonight or a wheaty beer. I just used to want a beer.
Yeah.
So these things do.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is when I started writing Morning Newsbeat, I've said this to you before, when I started writing Morning Newsbeat, I was primarily a beer drinker. Pretty early in, I shifted and became more of a wine drinker, and now I drink vodka. So God knows what I'll be drinking 20 years from now.
I'm scared to know. But again, for all the readers out there, understand he sobers up in time to do Morning Newsbeat. Kevin,
yes, I can say that in 20 years, I have never written Morning Newsbeat under the influence. Doesn't mean I haven't had a beer or a glass of wine or a small vodka, but I've never been impaired.
Well, not by alcohol. But let's stay with this issue, because for 20 years, I mean, you have been doing this almost on a daily basis for 20 years. In fact, I mean, I know you take some vacation time now, which is something I've told you in the past to do more of. How long did it take you to take the first vacation? Because when you started this was a complete entrepreneurial venture.
To be completely accurate, before I took my first break, it was 3 days. And the reason I say that is because I launched it on the Monday before Thanksgiving, worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just to see how it felt. Then took Thursday and Friday off for Thanksgiving weekend, came back on Monday. And then it was a couple of years before I took any time off. I mean, I would take Christmas off and stuff like that. But I lived in fear for the first year or two that if I stopped doing it for a day, my readers would go elsewhere and they would never come back. This is not proven to be the case. And at a certain point, my wife said, if you die doing this, it sort of defeats the purpose. You got to take some time off. And more even to the point, and I can't remember exactly when it was, but during the first couple of years of doing Morning Newsbeat, there were several months, maybe longer than that I was actually doing two. I was doing Morning Newsbeat, and I was writing the Knacks at a site, had a news feed at one point. Lindsay Hutter, who was then at Knacks, brought me on board. So I was doing Morning Newsbeat, and I was doing another one for a long, what it seemed like forever, for a long period of time, until finally the other one, the next one went away. They did their own thing, which was great. And I was able to focus mostly on Morning Newsbeat. But the thing is it's always been, right, regardless. Now I probably work 46 weeks a year, something like that. I think as one of the things I've discovered, and when I started doing this, I remember thinking to myself, it's going to be okay, because when I get older, they tell you that you need less sleep. This has not been my experience. I have not find that I need less sleep. So I probably work 47 weeks a year, mostly 5-day weeks. So,
and we'll talk about the future in a second, because, you know, at some point we got to help you wind down a little. I am asked some questions when I'm out on the road, because people know about Morning Newsbeat. They know I write once a week, and they will ask me.
No, let's be clear. People come up to you all the time and say that you and Kevin do such a great job. I don't know how the two of you get it out every day, which gives me such enormous pleasure.
Well, and if they like it, I say, yes, it's Kevin and I doing it every day. If they don't like it, I say it's mostly Kevin.
Yeah.
But I do explain to people how hard it is. And you and I have both worked for newspapers in our career. And it's almost a miracle to bring out a daily publication, because it requires so many things to happen. So I want to ask you two questions about that. First of all, have you ever had a day where you woke up and thought, I've got nothing to say?
That's probably the question I get probably the most, which is, what happens if you wake up in the morning and there's no news? I can tell you after 20 years that has never happened. It has never happened. And I would be hard pressed to go find a day where there were anything less than 8 or 9 stories. I don't think there was, you know, I mean, occasionally, as in this kind of anniversary week, I'll do a single story just because I'm doing something different, whether it's an interview with somebody or whatever. But I've never had a day where, if I were doing a regular full-on morning news beat, that there were anything less than 8 or 9 stories. And sometimes 12, sometimes 13, sometimes 15. But no, that doesn't.
All right. Now, the second question, and this comes to me all the time, and you probably get it also. People may feel more comfortable asking me. You get a lot of email. And sometimes the email discussion takes on a life of its own. And one article you do can trigger a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks of email response and debate. Are all the emails legitimate? Look me in the eye. Are they all legitimate?
I've never faked an email, ever. I mean, I don't have to. I wouldn't do it anyway. I'd rather say, if I don't have a ton of email, and there'll be occasionally days, because reading the email and sort of going through it and deciding what to run probably takes almost as much time as anything. And if I run out of time, then that's when it'll say, you know, morning, you know, your views will return tomorrow. That happens. If I do that too many days in a row, though, I get email from people saying, you know, we're interested in your views, but we really want to know what everybody else has to say too. Don't be a slacker. I've gotten those emails. No, never had to fake an email. It's always interesting. The emails, you know, I have generally found over the years that there'll be a story that I'll write and a commentary I'll write where I'll say, this is going to get them going. And I'll get one email. And then there'll be some throwaway story that I'll be a smartass about. And that's the one that generates, you know, 2 weeks of email. So it's an odd, you know, it's an odd sort of construct. But no, it's one of the, I will say that it's one of the great joys. I mean, I read every email. I don't post every email. I sort of made a decision going into it, because when you start a website back in the day, right, they would say, well, okay, you're going to do a bulletin board where everybody can just post their reactions. And I said, no, I don't want to do that, because I felt that I was dealing with a customer base, a reader base that didn't have a ton of time and didn't want to have their time wasted. And I said, I will read every email and I'll make decisions about which emails are going to run. I'll be the filter. I will curate them, and I listen. That gives me a certain amount of power in terms of being able to direct where the conversation is going, because there is a lunatic fringe out there, and I'm not going to post their emails, and so they keep sending them, but I don't post them, and so but. You know, so I've always been sort of careful about that. I want to direct the conversation. I want to make it constructive. If sometimes people will write very personally demeaning things about other readers, or even people I've written about, I don't tend to post those. You want to be personally demeaning about me, I'm happy to post those. Take your best shot. I'm a big boy. And I get the last word. So, I mean, go ahead. And so but I've always felt very strongly about, you know, about making sure that as many different points of view get represented as possible. You know, more people tell me I'm wrong than tell me I'm right, which is great. Makes me think. There are probably lots of subjects that I could probably say, okay, with, you know, over the 20 years, my positions have evolved on because I've been educated by readers.
All right, give us an example.
Right now, there's a long conversation we're all having about inflation. And I'll put stuff out there. I have to be honest, I'm not an economist. You studied economics in college. I didn't. I was a film major, for God's sakes. I know nothing about economics except what I read in the papers. And so I'm learning from different people about different approaches. Now, my reaction to it all is sort of like, I actually think that if you could get a bunch of these people who feel differently about what's creating inflation in a room together, gave them the power to say, listen, you're not coming out of the room until you've reached some sort of consensus about how to deal with inflation. I think lots of smart people with widely varying economics and political views could actually do that. We don't live in that world, unfortunately. But so I'm just trying to synthesize it and learn, same as everybody else.
You know, you never listened to me. I told you years ago that the rule in economics is if you took all the world's economists and laid them end to end, they'd never reach a conclusion. So
that's a joke that's older than you and me put together.
Yes, obviously, but it's true.
Yeah.
Let's be a little retrospective for a second. Here we are in 2021. If you could go back and talk to 2001 Kevin Coupe, what do you think happened over these 20 years that would have shocked him the most? That if you said, here's what life is like 20 years later, first of all, he might have been shocked that Morning Newsbeat lasted 20 years.
I think probably, I mean, in some ways, Amazon, I would say. I think that the growth of e-commerce is probably, would surprise me, although not shock me, in terms of, because I think I was pretty early in terms of writing about this stuff and talking about this stuff. I can remember that at a certain point, fairly early in the Morning Newsbeat existence, had to be in the early 2000s, right? I was actually at what was then a CIES, with the International Organization, a conference, and it was a technology conference, and I was facilitating it and doing a couple of speeches or something. And I remember standing up in front of the room and holding up what was then the original first generation iPod, which I had. And I can remember saying to them, I think this technology behind this is going to change all of our worlds and change how people shop. Got that one right. And, you know, but I think that, and that was more of a lucky, I mean, it was a lucky guess, to be honest. It was, and that's all it was. I'm one of those people, I actually don't even believe in futurists. I think I'm a good guesser. I'm a pretty good guesser. I get a pretty decent percentage. And so, but even saying that, my feeling is that, you know, I think Amazon, the growth of Amazon, would probably surprise me. Hey, listen, I would have bought Amazon stock in 2000 instead of investing in Morning Newsbeat, and I'd be pretty well off today. But I think that's probably the one that would grab me. I can remember I was an early adopter though. I was such an early adopter on Amazon that the one year at Christmas time, I got a mug from Jeff Bezos, not personally, obviously, but they sent coffee mugs to all their customers to say thank you for being customers. There weren't that many of us at that point. I wish I had that mug. I don't know where it is. It's, you know,
it'd be worth something, yeah.
But that's, you know, that's the one that I think the degree to which e-commerce has evolved, certainly with the speed it has over the last couple of years, that's the thing that would shock me. But I would say to 47-year-old Kevin, this is the thing you need to watch out for as a reporter. But if you want to buy Amazon stock, it'd probably be a good idea.
Yeah. Also buy some Apple stock.
And some Apple stock.
I would tell you, because I give the same thought to myself. And, you know, I always remember there was that famous quote, I think it's back from like the year 1900, where the head of the patent office said, pretty much everything that could be invented has been invented. And I think in 2001, if someone had come, and I don't know why they would have gone to either you or me, and said, what do you think of the technological advancements of the next 20 years? We had cell phones at that point. We had iPods. And the notion of having, I mean, we're filming this today. We're 250 miles apart. We're both using iPhones. And the camera quality is probably better than Cecil B. DeMille had to film the 10 Commandments. And it's all because of this device that was created. And I don't think there would have been any way 20 years ago of imagining the impact of these devices, of people having the ability to walk around all the time with a camera, with a tape recorder, with a GPS, just basically connected to everyone else. And the other one I would add on, of course, is social media, which is not something I saw coming, that changed the way we all talk. Suddenly, everybody has a megaphone. And sadly, a lot of people don't use it very responsibly. And I think for people in business, the reality is that every single day, every single interaction with every single consumer can become a viral moment now. And there are no more secrets anymore. There are no more private moments. And frankly, I think the technology is ahead of us as humans. We are still trying to cope with all of this power that we suddenly have. And we seem to be using, quite frankly, pretty irresponsibly a lot of the time. But it's amazing how much happened in 20 years. I mean, I think, as you said, Amazon's a great example. Apple is a great example. Tesla, think of the companies that no longer exist that 20 years ago were actually still, 20 years ago, and for all the kids out there watching, Sears still actually mattered. And now, you can look it up on Wikipedia to find out who Sears was and what they did. Now it's basically just empty real estate.
What's Kmart? Well, we had the story the other day, right? Kmart's down to 6 stores in the US, 8 stores.
How many stores does Blockbuster have today? Is it down to 1? Yeah.
1 in Bend, Oregon. I've been there. And in fact, the reason I can say that is because down below, there's this video that I put together. There's a picture of me in front of the one remaining Blockbuster video store.
Sure. And 20 years ago, if somebody had said, you can stream, I remember there being a television commercial of some guy checking into a motel. And it was a crappy motel, no food, no amenities. And the girl at the reception desk, much as it was a reception desk, said, by the way, you can watch every movie that's ever been made at any point, anytime in your room. And the guy was like, what are you talking about? And this was before anyone had conceived of Netflix, that essentially the consumer programs. And for me, that is another one of the big changes of the 20 years and probably going forward. The power the consumer has today overwhelms the power of the businesses that serve them. And anyone who's thinking that we're still in control is long gone. Yeah. Now you have to be a partner.
I was going to say, think about how when back in the day, you'd check into a hotel and you'd call your wife or you'd call your office from the hotel phone, right? And then you'd have a digit number because you'd want to get on an account, right? You wouldn't want to do. And now you call them on, I mean, I don't even know why they bother having phones in hotels anymore. Yeah. Right? They should replace them all with like Alexas that you just do. When you want to talk to the front desk, you say, Alexa, put me through to the front desk or something like that. It's so totally changed. By the way, I should say that one of the favorite things about what I've done for the last 20 years is that there's been a long period of time that my kids believe that in fact that Morning Newsbeat was a cover and that I in fact was an assassin, and that it was a great cover. I could go anywhere I wanted. I had no boss. Nobody knew really where I was. And if I called home on my cell phone and said, oh yeah, I'm in LA, I'm covering a story, I could in fact be in Istanbul, just knocking off some bad.
All right, let's take you down.
It made me sound so much cooler than I was, because my kids would say that to their friends. They'd say, he says he's a writer, but he's really an assassin.
Okay, you're no assassin, and we're gonna, just in case your kids are watching this, we're gonna bring you all the way down. What's the stupidest thing you've written in the last 20 years? Because I know the answer to this one.
It's easy. It's an easy one. So I was at another CIES. I haven't been for a number of years now, but they used to do these amazing, because it's a very different kind of organization now, but they used to do these extraordinary, once a year, they'd get together and they would go to these major cities all around the world, and they would have these 3 or 4 days of meetings. And the great thing about CIES as it existed at the time is if you were a 1 or 2 store retailer, you had as much influence and power and juice sitting at those tables and sitting in that audience as somebody who had 1,000 stores. They were very small d democratic about that. They were really trying to lift everybody's boat, whether it was an aircraft carrier or it was a 24-foot sailboat, to probably stretch the metaphor further than it should go. Anyway, one year they did, it was in Paris, and L'Oreal would always sponsor the end event. And they'd usually bring in really amazing entertainment. And in fact, the only 2 times the entertainment was really lacking happened to be the 2 times while I went, that they happened to do them in the United States. But if they were outside the US, it was unbelievable. So one year it's Paris. They take over the Louvre. They take over the Louvre for this event, right? And it's gorgeous, and it's black tie. There's probably a picture. I think there's a picture in the video of me in a black tie. That's at a CIES event, and it's fantastic. And and they always have great entertainment. So we're all sitting there, everybody's there, and the guy walks out, and he's an opera singer named Andrea Bocelli. Now, I know nothing about opera, but what I quickly learned from the people at the table that I was at is that there were people in that audience that would have donated kidneys to get a concert to be at a concert for Andrea Bocelli. I mean, he was great. I mean, it was, I guess. I mean, I knew nothing about opera. So when I wrote it up, because I am a little bit of a Weisenheimer, I said he seemed really, really good. Though I personally probably would have preferred Jimmy Buffett. And I said, what I didn't understand about Andrea Bocelli is he doesn't make eye contact with the audience. Well, I wrote this up, posted it, and very quickly got, I don't even know how many emails I got. All of them basically saying, you're a moron. Andrea Bocelli is blind. I swear, as God is my witness, I did not know that Andrea Bocelli was blind. I didn't know. I just didn't. And I ran every one of those emails, and you're a moron were the kind ones. And I just finished it up by saying, I just didn't know. If he'd been like Stevie Wonder or Ray Charles and he wore the sunglasses, maybe I would have figured it out, but I didn't know. And then I got all these emails about the sunglass crap that people thought I was wrong. But in my defense, if you go back and look at Andrea Bocelli album covers, right? Remember seeing this a couple of years later. So there's an album cover. It's Andrea Bocelli and yada, yada, yada. And he's sitting there and sitting on the hood of a car. Like he's going to get in the car and drive away. Well, again, I would not have known that he was blind. I just didn't know. But it was the stupidest thing I'd ever written. And in a career full of stupid things that I've written. But that was the one, and that was the one where everybody called me on. Well,
there has to be that kind of moment. The other thing, and you and I, whenever we're on video together, we both have the same reaction. I think everybody watching this knows Kevin and I co-authored The Big Picture, Essential Business Lessons from the Movies. So we always have a lot of pop culture references in everything we do. And in our ridiculous old age adult brains, we still see each other as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. We're young and we're hip and we're riding through the West. But when we see ourselves on video, and you have to know the Muppets for this, we have become very quickly Statler and Waldorf. the two old guys sitting up in the balcony going, these guys stink.
Wasn't there a Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau, Grumpy Old Men? That's
basically, yes.
I'm happy to be Jack Lemmon to your Walter Matthau.
Thank you. We went from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to Grumpy Old Men. But anyhow, so to be Grumpy Old Men here for a second, it's 2021. What comes next? Do you ever think about how long you're going to do this, or any plans you have for the upcoming years?
I have no plans to retire. I have no idea how much longer I'm going to do this. I mean, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. So that'll, plans seem, I firmly believe in the John Lennon quote, life is what happens when you're making other plans. I do think that it's interesting. One of the things, this is a great time to put this out to the Morning Newsbeat audience, right? So Mrs. Content Guy has retired. And she is, after several long and illustrious careers, she was a banker and a stockbroker for 15 years and was, hot stuff at that. Then she stayed home with the kids for 10 years. She had already had her MBA, went back to school, got a master's in education, and then taught for 20 years, elementary education, but has just retired. And she asked me all the time, when am I going to retire? Because one of the things that we talk about wanting to do while we're still ambulatory is to walk the Camino, which is basically a 500-mile walk from France all the way across Spain. And it takes about a month. And so I said, well, it's a little hard for me to take a month off. Because then I am worried that people, my readers might leave and not come back. She goes, no, they'll come back. So I'll put this out to the Morning Newsbeat readership. If I took a month off to go hike the Camino with my wife, would you all come back when the month is over? And maybe 5 weeks, because I'm not that fast. So I'm putting that out there. That's one of the things I'd like to do. I don't know. I'm going to keep working. And I mean, Michael, I know you feel the same way, which is that this is fun. This is not, there are people out there who have to, who do heavy labor, manual labor. This is not that. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I read a lot of stories. I try and formulate ideas, and I write. This is not, and then I eat and drink and travel for a living, or did before COVID, right? And so this is not hard work. So I'm going to do it as long as I can do it. There's a great line from the Jimmy Buffett song, which says, any manual labor I've done is purely by mistake. And I'm you can put me in that category. We'll see. We'll see. As long as people are, it's too much work to do if nobody's reading it. But as long as people are reading it and it's fun, and maybe you guys will give me some time off to go hike the Camino, then I do this for a long time.
And I think what people can't possibly know about us are those times when Morning Newsbeats shuts for a week or two. Kevin and I are calling each other almost every day to say, oh my God, I wanted to write about that. And both of our wives, I believe, are terrified that if for some reason we don't have this outlet, that we're going to be standing in the breakfast nook or whatever, doing basically a full 1 hour speech on the meaning of what just happened, what we can use as a metaphor for some movie or a baseball game or something else, because simply that's who we are. So it is a lot of fun doing. It's a lot of work doing Morning Newsbeat. And I know what you do is a lot more than what I do, but it's a labor of love.
Well,
I can't remember who said it.
My kids used to, at the dinner table, everyone, they'd start to tell a story and they'd look at me finally, Dad, this is off the record.
Yeah.
Because they knew that if it was a good story and if I could turn it into a business lesson, it was going to end up on Morning Newsbeat. So they were very careful about that.
I think the other thing we have to let people know is occasionally, I have been in the audience watching Kevin do a speech where he has talked about his son, the classical musician. My son is the classical musician, not his. And in this book, we have both done speeches where we passionately talk about a chapter in it, only to realize the other person wrote the chapter.
Yeah, I don't think, in all fairness, you're just teasing. I've never referred to my son, the classical musician.
Not yet.
Not yet. But yes, we do often forget stories. And you and I have both done that, where we've told stories about something and only to realize about something that happened to us. And then suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute, that didn't happen to me. That happened to Michael, which is how Brian Williams got into trouble, by the way. So, you got to be, but it's by
no one cares that
by
much
design.
about the two of us. Yeah, you know what, Kevin? It's great to have a chat like this. And I hope the morning newsbeat readers enjoy us reminiscing about this. Because for you, 20 years, for me, 14 years, it's really, they always say, if you love what you do, you don't work a day. And this is something we both love doing. Luckily, we get to cover a very interesting world. It's never dull. There is always something to say. And we've both gotten to meet a lot of really, really wonderful people in the course of this journey. So let me turn it over to you. It's your 20th anniversary. Anything else you want to say to the Morning Newsbeat audience?
Come back tomorrow. Just, stay engaged. As long as I'm only as engaged in so many ways as long as the audience is. And so come back tomorrow, because because here's the other thing. I get questions all the time. What's your editorial calendar? And I go, I don't know. Because every day is a little bit of an adventure. Every day is, which is all you can ever ask out of any, career or job. It's always different. It's always new. Although 3 days a week now, you can count on me going on a rant about Instacart. But other than that, I think my experience has been, I think the audience is having almost as much fun as I'm having, and I'm having way too much fun. So I have no complaints. I just, like I said, come back tomorrow.
And of course, as you always say, we appreciate people watching these videos, reading our material, but we always want to know what you've got to say. So however you feel about this, however you feel about Kevin going off and doing the Camino, or, even this reminiscence of 20 years, let us know what you think.
Michael, now that you've said that, somebody's going to say, yes, you should go to Spain. You should hike the Camino. Don't come back.
It may be your wife.
Maybe. But then it'll be like the person who, a couple of weeks ago wrote in and says, exactly, what do you know about retailing anyway? It was great, because 20 years it took somebody to ask that question.
They figured it out.
It's a very good question. I hope I have a better answer for it next time.
And maybe in 20 years you'll know better. Anyhow, Kevin, it has been a really terrific ride. It's fun to do it for me once a week. For you, I think you enjoy it every single day. So let me, as always, let you sign off to the Morning Newsbeat audience.
That's what's on our mind this morning. And as always, we want to hear what's on your mind.